Somewhere, right now, there is a version of your life happening in your head that hasn't happened yet. The job might fall through. The diagnosis might be bad. The person might leave. The thing you've been avoiding might finally catch up to you. Your body doesn't know the difference between a real threat and an imagined one, so it reacts to this unlived future exactly as it would to a real danger. Tight chest, racing thoughts, a night's sleep quietly stolen from you by an event that more often than not will never even occur. The old Buddhist teachers had a very direct way of describing this. They said we suffer twice for almost everything. Once, if it happens at all, and a second time in advance, purely from the imagining of it. And the second kind of suffering, they noticed, is almost always worse. It's longer, it's less honest, and it's built entirely out of a story we haven't finished writing yet. Here's the strange comfort hidden inside that observation. If worry is a story you're writing about a future you don't control, then you were never actually in control of the outcome you're so afraid of in the first place. You only ever controlled the story. Today I'm going to give you 8 old antidotes. Not new ideas, but ones tested for over 2,000 years, for what to do with a mind that insists on writing tragic endings to stories that haven't happened yet. Stay with me until the end. By the final antidote, out of control is going to sound less like a threat and a lot more like permission. There is an old story, older than most of the traditions that now tell it, about a farmer who lived a simple life with his son on a small piece of land. One day, his only horse broke through the fence and ran off into the hills. His neighbors came to console him. "What terrible luck," they said. The farmer only shrugged. "Maybe," he said. "We'll see." A few days later, the horse returned and brought with it 3 wild horses that had been running with it in the hills. The neighbors returned, this time to celebrate. "What wonderful luck," they said. The farmer only shrugged again. "Maybe," he said. "We'll see." Not long after, the farmer's son tried to tame one of the wild horses, was thrown from its back, and broke his leg badly. The neighbors came once more, certain now this was misfortune. "What terrible luck," they said. The farmer, sitting beside his injured son, only said, "Maybe, we'll see." Soon after, the country went to war, and soldiers came through every village, taking every able-bodied young man to fight. But the farmer's son, his leg still broken, was passed over and left at home. The neighbors, once again, called it luck. And the farmer, watching his son alive and safe, while so many other sons marched off toward a battlefield, said only what he had always said. "Maybe, we'll see." This story has outlived every empire that ever tried to claim it, because it points at something almost none of us want to hear when we're in the middle of worrying. We are astonishingly bad at knowing, in the moment, whether something is actually the disaster we've already decided it is. We call it truth. It's really just a guess, delivered with far too much confidence about a story that hasn't finished unfolding. So let's talk about what to do instead of guessing. 8 old antidotes for the anxious mind, drawn from this same well of wisdom the farmer seemed to draw from so effortlessly. Antidote 1. The present moment. Worry cannot survive in the present moment. Try it honestly, right now, while you are fully aware of your breath, the weight of your body in the chair, the sound of your own heartbeat. Is anything actually wrong in this exact second? Usually the answer is no. Worry requires a trip. It has to leave this moment and travel forward into a future that doesn't exist yet, or backward into a past that's already finished. The mind cannot generate anxiety about right now, only about elsewhere. So the first antidote is the oldest one in the entire tradition. Return again and again to the body, the breath, the 5 senses, the only place worry has no address. Feel your feet on the ground. Notice one sound you can hear. Notice the temperature of the air on your skin. Each time you do this, you are not defeating the worry through force. You are simply stepping out of the only place it was ever able to live. Antidote. 2. The circle of control. Most worry is spent guarding a border that was never actually ours to defend. Draw, in your mind, 2 circles. The small one holds what is genuinely yours to influence: your effort, your honesty, your next choice. The larger one holds everything else: other people's opinions, the outcome of the interview, whether it rains on the day you needed sun. Almost all worry lives entirely in that outer circle, disguised as diligence. It feels responsible to worry about things outside your control. It feels like care, but it produces nothing. No better outcome, no more prepared version of you, only exhaustion. The second antidote is simply to ask honestly every time worry arrives: is this in my small circle or my large one? If it's in the small circle, act. If it's in the large one, the old teachers would say, there is only one appropriate response left: to set it down, not because you don't care, but because caring was never the same thing as controlling. Antidote. 3. Impermanence. The third antidote comes from one of the central teachings of the entire Buddhist path: the truth that nothing, no state, no feeling, no crisis, no season, holds still. Everything that has ever felt permanent to you, a hard week, a frightening diagnosis, a broken heart, was in fact already moving the entire time, whether it felt like it or not. This isn't meant as a hollow reassurance that everything works out. It is something quieter and more honest than that. Whatever you're afraid is fixed and unbearable right now is already, at this very moment, changing shape beneath your feet, the way a river never holds the same water twice, even as it looks the same from the bank. Say to yourself when a worry feels permanent: this too is moving, even if I cannot feel it moving yet. You do not have to believe it will resolve well. You only have to remember that it will not stay exactly, unbearably this, because nothing ever has. Antidote. 4. The second arrow. The Buddha taught that pain in life is often unavoidable. The first arrow. But the second arrow, he said, is the one we shoot ourselves. The story we add on top of the pain, the catastrophizing, the "this always happens to me," the imagined future built entirely from today's bad moment. The fourth antidote is learning to feel the first arrow fully honestly, without flinching from it, and then catching yourself before you reach for the second. When something goes wrong, ask, what actually happened versus what story am I about to build on top of it? The event might be real. The 4 imagined disasters that follow it in your mind, one after another, usually are not. Antidote. 5. Not knowing. The 5th antidote is the farmer's own phrase, and it may be the most freeing sentence in this entire video. We'll see. So much worry comes from a desperate need to already know the ending, to have the outcome settled before it's even happened, so the uncertainty can finally stop. But certainty about the future was never actually available to you, worried or not. All the worry ever brought you was a worse version of the waiting. Practice saying it out loud if you can, the next time your mind insists on writing the tragic ending early. Maybe. We'll see. Not as defeat, as an honest admission that you were never actually able to know, and that not knowing was always survivable, whether you white-knuckled through it or not. Antidote. 6. The body as anchor. The 6th antidote is physical, because worry, however mental it feels, lives partly in the body: a tight chest, a clenched jaw, shallow breath. When a spiral begins, place a hand over your heart or your stomach and take 5 slow breaths, counting the exhale longer than the inhale. This isn't a distraction technique. It's a direct message to the nervous system that the danger the mind believes is happening right now is not, in fact, happening in the body right now. The body, reassured, often calms the mind faster than any argument ever could. Antidote. 7. Turning outward. The seventh antidote is compassion turned outward, and it is one of the oldest remedies for an anxious mind in the entire tradition. Worry tends to shrink your world down to a single, repeating loop about yourself. One of the fastest ways to loosen that loop is to briefly, deliberately, turn your attention towards someone else's well-being. A small kindness, a message checking in on a friend, a quiet wish for someone else's peace. This isn't avoidance, it's a redirection of the same attention that was spinning uselessly inward towards something that actually produces warmth instead of dread. A mind occupied with genuine care for another has far less room left for rehearsing its own disasters. Antidote 8. Trust. The eighth and final antidote is the hardest and the one every other antidote has been quietly building toward. Trust, not blind optimism, not a guarantee that everything will turn out fine, but a willingness to stop insisting you must be the sole author of every outcome in your life. You were never actually running the whole story. You were only ever responsible for your own chapter, your effort, your honesty, your next right action. The rest was always being carried by something larger than your worry could ever reach anyway. Time, other people's choices, the sheer unpredictability the farmer seemed to have made peace with long before his neighbors ever did. Let today's version of this be simple. Whatever you're carrying right now that was never actually yours to control, set it down gently, the way you'd release something back into hands far more capable of holding it than your own exhausted grip. So here is what I want you to carry with you, gathered from all 8. Return to the present moment where worry cannot live. Sort what's actually yours to control from what only feels urgent. Remember that nothing that hurts right now is standing still, even if it feels frozen. Catch the second arrow before you fire it at yourself. Let "we'll see" replace the ending you were so sure you already knew. Anchor yourself in the body when the mind starts to spiral. Turn outward towards someone else's peace when your own feels impossible to find. And finally, trust that you were only ever responsible for your own chapter, not the whole story. The farmer never once claimed to know how things would turn out. That was never the source of his peace. His peace came from something much simpler: the willingness to meet each new turn, good or bad, without rushing to decide what it meant before it had finished revealing itself. You are allowed that same peace. Not because your life will stop being uncertain, it won't. Nothing's life ever has been, not once, not for anyone who has ever lived, but because uncertain was never actually the same thing as unsafe, and out of control was never really the threat you thought it was. It was simply the truth the whole time, quietly waiting for you to stop fighting it. If this reached you at the right moment, sit with it for a few minutes before the next thing pulls you away. And if you'd like more of these, old wisdom for the noisy, uncertain mind so many of us carry now, stay a little longer. There's more here waiting for you.